Ice Keys on the beat.
It seems that whenever the black people or the Africans start uniting and start pushing, start talking about things that are important, not the Kardashians, football, or whatever shooting is going on,
growing the followership,
right? We
speaking the
instantly
truth.
get shut down, right? It's almost like they cannot fathom the fact that there is some black people out here that are actually
Intelligent.
intellectually running circles around all of them. I always say all the time that it does not make sense that Brandon can be Elon's president. It does not make sense
I
that
should know what Brandon is.
that would be the current president of the US. Okay? If you're going to be president of the strongest nation on earth, right, there should be some level of intellect that you should be able to at least hit that bar. I get it. The guys went to certain schools and things like that,
He's been in Congress for how long?
right? But I think that what social media has exposed is the fact that there are so many smart people out there. There's so much talent out there that historically went unfound simply because the media and really who makes it to the top was decided by a small group of people. But now that we have Twitter out there, I remember one time we were actually in a Twitter space. I think this is when the recent conflicts in Africa broke out. And for once, it was a different situation where you had Africans across the globe coming together and discussing these things themselves. And despite what the news said, it did not matter because we were in the Twitter spaces and we were able to talk to people who were there on the ground live. So that is one thing. And I think through this, I'm really hoping that we can sort of drive through that vision of yours to have the Africans all kind of together. Now, here is where I have a bit of a challenge. When you speak about the US is respected, because they're respected and stuff like that, I see where you're coming from. But do you think they're respected because of their integrity and everything else, or do you think they're respected, or just respected because they're feared? But it's not really respect if it's fear. Are they respected or feared because of the weaponry, essentially?
I think there's two sides to this.
Okay.
There's the part that you just mentioned, right? Brute force. There's
Right.
the carrot and the stick, and they know how and when to use that, right? They know when to use the stick and they know when to use the carrot. And the carrot has been so subliminal that you may not have realized, right?
Right.
I grew up in Cameroon watching and listening to American movies, American TV shows, British radio, BBC, French TV shows. I used to watch, The Prince of Bel-Air, things like that in Cameroon, right? Those things would show on my TV. They wouldn't show us local TV shows, local movies. And as a child, you see these things and you think, oh my gosh, America is like the promised land. Oh my gosh, America is the land of the free and the brave. And so they feed you these things where you want to be American before you even reach there. You want to live that life. And I think that we don't do enough positive images, enough positive programming of Africa, right? And that's where my podcast came out, Umoja Sessions and the documentary Amazing Africa, because I was tired of the negative portrayal that people had of Africa and Africans, right? I came to the United States and people were talking to me about Africa, asking me things like, oh, do you even have internet?
Lion.
Go to school. I read better than you. I write better than you. That should
You
be
go to high school here.
but they still had those stereotypes in their head because even if they saw me, which was proof that their stereotype was wrong, they still couldn't.
Yeah.
It was sort of a cognitive dissonance, right? Like they couldn't put me in a box. At some point, some of them would even say, "Oh, you sound so articulate," and then they stop themselves. They're trying to control a black person,
It's
or
all
an
like
African person, right? Because it's just they can't fathom that there are smart people around the world that don't look like them. And we don't do enough of that, right? We don't showcase enough of our people, enough of our entrepreneurs, enough of our history, right? Because our history was also stolen and taken from us. So I think we don't need to use the stick and we don't even need to use the carrot because guess what? We don't have to create imaginary characters on TV. We really have the truth, right? We are empowered in the truth of who we are, who we've always been. We have people who have actually existed in this world that we can use in characters in books in movies and base themselves on their true life events, on what they actually went through and how they overcame, right? So we don't have to lie, we don't have to make things up, make up stories about America was great and no, right? Like Africans have always been great, whether or not we want to accept. Everybody comes from a Black woman in Africa, right? Like whether or not you want to accept that, that is the truth. And technology, mathematics, everything was invented in Africa before it came out, right? The first calculator was the bone of Ishango. Do we know that? There was women who created that because they needed to count how many days before their next menstrual cycle. And that's how math came out. But nobody tells us that. Nope. Right? And we take on the stereotypes that people give us because we ourselves do not know the truth, right? And I can't blame African Americans for falling into that stereotype, but I blame us for not trying to redirect it and not giving them now the truth now that we have the tools to do that.
Hey, Linda, you're getting banned, man.
So powerful.
Now I know why you got banned.
So good.
She just literally told us that carrot the entire time was a stick, was just an invisible stick.
Exactly. I'm also glad that one of the things I was, not that I was really looking for it, but this was the train of thought that I had in mind. But I'm also glad you said that we don't even need the carrot stick situation.
Nope.
Because the level of intellect, right, that we hold amongst ourselves as a people is mind-blowing. Astronomical stuff. There was a video you sent in that group chat about the Nigerians and their performance in the United States and such. The top performing group of people out here, outperforming everyone. Yet it all gets boiled down to this idea that, as they'll call it, Nigerians, and they kind of always go to the Prince email thing, which they let it go. Right.
Nigerians in Nigeria are not successful, or Africans in Africa are not successful,
Exactly.
or Africans outside of the continent.
And you wonder why, right? Like, what are the circumstances that we find ourselves in Africa that make us want to have to flee, that make us want to have to take to boats and literally die at sea instead of staying there and sticking it out, right? Like, everybody wants to blame the person who's at sea and dies because they want to go to Europe for a better life. That's because they've been sold that on TV. That's what everybody has been telling them their whole lives. And what they see on the continent right now is not what they see on TV of what they could have. Obviously, when they get there, they realize the truth that it's really not all roses. But what are the circumstances and who are these leaders that are created these circumstances on the continent for people to be for their lives, right? And obviously, it goes back to the fact that it's not just the current leaders, right? It's the leaders and their masters who are still taking advantage of our country, who are still siphoning our money, but who are these leaders that are allowing that to happen till this day? So it's a double-edged sword.